the rabbi to be the Marad Atra, which is to say the kind of the rabbinic decisor of Jewish law. That's kind of a little bit of a misnomer in how actually things work, but that is the understanding of how things are done. And so I'm gonna show you in a moment. I'm gonna share with you one of a paper, not because of the content of the paper, but more for the fact of the disclaimer that is always there on all of these papers. But the basic idea would be is if a question comes to me of Jewish law, for which is something that I know an answer to, that answer we look, I go back, I look at the sources, and a decision is made. If that question is something that I think has ramifications for the greater good of the congregation, and I'm worried about where things are, I will get a consensus of where the congregation is at. So for many of you who are involved with Bethel over the past 10, 11 years, a great example, a couple could be our decision about the cemetery. Our conversation could be about live streaming on Shabbat, way before COVID, by the way, was a conversation. These were conversations that I went to our ritual committee, to our religious life committee, and then took to the board and said, hey, what do you want to do? Now, one of the, and by the by, I think the important thing to kind of point out here, and I wonder about this for the reform movement, how, if it would be different at all, is that while the question was asked of me, when we got to the board meeting to make a decision, I basically said, listen, I need you to understand, this is where I'm falling out on the decision. But had the decision been a residing no, right? Had the decision been something like, I don't think that doing live streaming is acceptable, then the congregation would have been in an interesting place about what to do, right? I hope that makes a little bit of sense, right? So the congregation being in a place where they came to me and said, Stephen, what do you think about live streaming? And I said, I think that makes perfect sense for where we are and for people who are homebound and everything else, and we're not turning it on and off. It makes perfect sense. Well, then I can put it in the congregation's hand, in the board's hands, and say, hey, listen, make a decision. You decide what you think is best, because I was okay with either side of the coin. If I was adamantly against and didn't feel like I thought it was a violation of Jewish law for us to do it, then that would be a different dilemma, right? They would need to be able to say, hey, listen, we're going to go a different direction with clergy, right? I mean, and by the way, there are plenty of synagogues that do that, right? Clergy have to have a backbone to be able to stand up and say, this is where my line is, and look themselves in the mirror. And so that would be a great example. The other place we go to, where Rabbi Berezin beautifully spoke about, just as they have in the movement of the reform movement, is that we have something called the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards. And this is a committee that writes papers on major questions of Jewish law. Now, some of those questions you and I may not think are major. I may not even think are major, but they are questions that are asked of local community rabbis who don't necessarily have the resources and the time to be able to research what is the right answer here. And so they kind of send it up the chain, if you will. And this group of rabbis ends up kind of taking it on. And if they think it's worthy, they will do a lot of investigation and write very lengthy and thoughtful papers on this question. So just really quickly, just to kind of share this, just to hopefully it'll probably make you laugh.